welcome to your math lesson. Today we're talking in lesson 3.5. It's going to be about dividing decimals by a whole number. So that's something that you should be hopefully familiar with. But we're just going to kind of take a look at that to get us ready for dividing with decimals. We're going to throw some decimals in there and see how we do with that. So to get started, you might not know where I am today. Today I am in Mrs. G's office. Right? I figured, where do you go when you have problems? Mrs. G. What do we have today? Problems. So naturally we ended up in Mrs. G's office. So today we're going to hang out in here, get some work done, and I'm going to pretend to be more of a boss than I am. So let's go ahead and get started. If we're talking about dividing a triple digit or even bigger number by a whole number, what's that going to look like? Let's think of an example. Let's say that Mr. Hall goes and sells a bunch of cookies, and he says, I'm going to give that to all of my students. I'm going to spread out the money that I make from selling cookies to all my students. Well, all my favorite students, so I'm going to only give it to all 25 of you. So what that's going to look like is I'm going to have to figure out however much I sold. So let's say I sold $432 worth of cookies, and half of it was just because I bought my cookies back, right? So I've got $432, and I'm going to divide that amongst the 25 students to figure out how much each student's going to get. So those are the kind of problems we're talking about today. Another real-life example that you could think of was, let's say you're having a wedding and you've got 212 guests. You want to feed your guests. So at your reception, you are going to have tables set up, but you can't put all 242 people, or whatever number I just said, at a long table, right? So you're going to have to take 242, and let's say that each table sits 6 people. So 242 divided by 6, and then you're going to know how many tables you're going to need. So this is something that's going to happen a lot in your life, something you're going to need to be pretty familiar with. So that's what we're getting into today. Let's go ahead and take a look at our first problem. So go ahead and go to your PBIL section, and that's where we're going to get started. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the... Make sure that you're in your PBIL section and work alongside me. We're going to do our first problem together, and I'm going to walk you through step by step. Here's what our problem is going to be. Our class collected $232 to share equally among 4 charities. But we don't know how much to give to each charity. So based on those numbers, how do we know how much to give to each charity? Well, from our original problem, what was our big amount that we're trying to divide? Well, it was $232. So make sure you write alongside with me. $232. This is going to be our dividend. So this is what we are dividing up among different groups. So this is our dividend inside the bracket. How many charities did we want to divide our total to? Well, we wanted to divide it among 4. This is our divisor. So how much money will each group get from our $232? That's what's going to be in our quotient, our answer to our division problem. Let's go ahead and solve this step by step. To start off, I'm going to look and see how many times 4 can go into 2. Well, 4 cannot evenly go into 2, so what I'm going to do is put an X above it. This is telling me that 4 cannot go into 2. Let's look at 23 now. How many times can 4 go into 23? Well, if I remember, I can think of an estimate using compatible numbers. What number is close to 23 that 4 evenly goes into? Well, 20 is a number that 4 evenly goes into, and it goes into that 5 times. Another number close to 23 is 24 that 4 evenly goes into, but 24 is too big, so I'm not going to even consider that one. So let's go back to the other closest one, that's 5 times 4 to be 20. So we just said that 5 times 4 was 20, so we're going to write that below 23. And now I'm going to subtract this 20 from 23. 3 minus 0 is 3, and 2 minus 2 is 0. I should have written a 3. Now my next step is to bring down this 2. Now I'm asking, how many times will 4 go into 32? Well, we got lucky because 32 is evenly divisible by 4 to give us 8. What is 8 times 4? We just said it's 32. So 32 minus 32 is going to give us 0. So the answer to our problem is that each charity is going to end up with $58. Our quotient was 58. That's how much each charity gets. So this is the first problem that we worked out together. Hopefully this is just a refresher on how to divide by a whole number. Go ahead and flip to your guided practice section, and we're going to do a few more problems together, but we're also going to have some decimals thrown into the mix. Here's our first problem for our guided practice section. So again, work alongside with me and we're going to work through this problem. The first thing that I want you to realize is that we do have a decimal in our dividend. So remember, dividend, divisor, quotient. We have a decimal in our dividend. So that means that my answer is also going to have a decimal. Before I even start the problem, what I'm going to do is just automatically move this decimal upstairs. So that's how we know where the decimal is going to end up in our answer. I won't even have to mess with it now. So now I'm just going to solve this division problem like normal. So let's find our quotient. I start with how many times will 3 go into 9? Well, 3 goes into 9 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. But I'm not done because I have to do the rest of the problem. So I'm going to bring down this next 9. How many times will 3 go into 9? 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. Now I have to bring down my next ones because I still have digits left to solve. So I'm going to bring down 0. Well, how many times will 3 go into 0? It won't. So it's 0. 3 times 0 is 0. But again, I can't be finished because I still have more digits left to solve for. So now we bring down our 9. And how many times will 3 go into 9? Well, 3 will go into 9 3 times. And we ran out of space, but this would be a 9 again and subtract, and we're going to be at 0. So now, with bringing down this final 9, there's no digits left to solve for. So our answer is done. Our quotient is going to be 33.03, or 33 3/100. So solving a division problem with a decimal in the dividend is just like solving a normal division problem, but we have to remember to move the decimal upstairs. Let's look at number 2. Here's our final problem that we're going to solve in our guided practice. We're going to do 97.5 divided by 6. So with this problem, we have a decimal in our dividend. Remember, the first thing that I'm going to do is move my decimal upstairs. Now that that's taken care of, I can just solve this like normal. Make sure when you follow along that you're drawing in all the arrows that I do. So the first step that we do to solve a division problem is we look and see how many times will our divisor go into the first number of our dividend. Well, how many times will 6 go into 9? 6 will go into 9 one time. 1 times 6 is 6. And I subtract that answer from the first number. 9 minus 6 is 3. Then I'm going to bring down my 7. And I'm going to look and see how many times will 6 go into 37 without going over. Unfortunately, 6 does not evenly go into 37, but I do know that 6 times 6 is 36, which is pretty close. I'm going to subtract 36 from 37, and I'm going to end up with 1. And I know that you've done this before, but don't fast forward or skip ahead because we're going to end up running into a little roadblock here in just a second. So now I'm going to bring down my 5, and I'm going to end up with 15. How many times will 6 go into 15 without going over? Well, it'll go twice, and that's going to give us 12. 15 minus 12 is 3. Normally, when you're solving a division problem, you would say that my answer is whatever I have with a remainder of 3. When we're working with decimals, though, it's going to be a little bit different because our answer is our whole number and the decimal is technically what's going to be our remainder. So we can no longer have 16.2 remainder 3 because 0.2 is part of the remainder. So what we're going to have to do is annex a 0 to finish this out. Remember, annex is just a fancy word for add. So we annex a 0 because remember, this isn't changing the value of this number. 97.5 is the same as 97.50. I can add as many zeros as I want. It won't change the value. But I can annex zeros and it will help me solve the problem. So now that I have another number here, I'm going to bring it down. And that's going to leave me with 30. Well, how many times will 6 go into 30? Well, we got lucky, and this is a factor of 30. And I know that 6 times 5 is 30. When I subtract 30 from 30, I'm going to be left with 0. So now that nothing is left, now that I'm zeroed out, I know that my answer is now complete. And my quotient is going to be 16.25. The important takeaway from this is that we can annex a 0 if we still have something left, because our decimal now takes the place of what our remainder normally would be. So with decimals, we no longer have remainders. Our remainder is the decimal. So go ahead and take your quiz. And if you don't do so well, that's fine. Still email me your score. We'll get it cleared up in class tomorrow. Enjoy watching the Royals game. We're going to watch them beat Houston. And I will see you tomorrow.